Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another Exade replay coming to you with episode 15 of the series. Let's get right into it. So yet again this week, this series surprises me with just how serious it's taking itself. We're here at episode 15, and it's another very plot-heavy episode. I'm happy to report there's not a lot of shenanigans this episode. Over the past couple of years, really since I'd say Kamen Rider Den-O, the series have become progressively more and more focused on the comedy aspect. I understand that comedy appeals to children, which are their primary audience, but for some other viewers, they would prefer that the story be focused on more. Here, that is definitely the case in this episode. There's only one small hijink, one small appearance of Poppy Pipo Papo, but otherwise it is story. So let's go ahead and talk about that story. Now to start off with, you know this is a serious episode when we don't have the opening. We don't have the theme Excite by Daichi Miura, which they happen to mention is on sale now, but they save that for the end of the episode, so they're very much telling you, no, we need you to focus on everything we're letting you know this episode. Now the episode itself manages to get a bit of housekeeping out of the way by getting the subplot about Hiro praising Emu for his job there as a doctor, intern, what have you, out of the way at the beginning of the episode. He is trying to start to get used to him, but that's going to go away very quickly. So a significant portion of this episode is focused on this new character, Saiba Nico. As we've been saying over the last couple of episodes, Saiba Nico has kind of decided to attach herself to Taiga for whatever reason. Apparently last week at some point off camera, she gave Taiga some information about Emu, which has allowed her to stick around a little longer, but now she seems to be kind of throwing her weight around, saying, hey, I'm going to be moving in. How come you still haven't beat Emu yet? I want to use your driver. How come you haven't beat Emu yet? She's really pushing this Emu beating thing. So what ends up happening is that she steals Taiga's driver and Gashot and has Emu come out to the scene where she is, saying, oh, I've got Bugster virus, or someone here has Bugster virus, at which point she fakes illness again. Emu decides to check her out, only to see that she's been diagnosed with nothing, she's faking it. It's at that point that she decides to reveal herself as being very anti-M. She seems to hate the gamer portion of him. Now the reason for this being ties to a flashback. It seems that 6 years prior, Emu had taken part in a tournament for a fighting game where Saiba Nico was present. Now we see Emu clearly having no problem with this tournament. He's going to win outright. His opponent seems to be having a harder time, and Saiba Nico, a much younger version, is there watching from the audience. So my question is, 1, what was she doing there? Probably she's a fan of games, but 2, what is her attachment to Emu since he's there on stage and she's out in the audience? My guess is that the opponent was a relative, possibly a brother, cousin, what have you, and she took that personally. Whether or not that's the case, here in the present day, she very much has a grudge against him and tries to transform into Kamen Rider Snipe, but that doesn't work, of course, because she doesn't have the Bugster virus inoculation having been given to her. But then we find she kind of gets what she deserves when she ends up having the Bugster virus. They check her out and she seems to be diagnosed with bacon, just the way the waves look on the screen, but really it's the Bugster Revol who we saw earlier targeting Snipe. The funny thing about Revol is that he's not even an issue this episode. He's so much of a non-combatant. First Emu tries to fight him, he whiffs every attack, but then from that point on, nobody bothers with him. Even Pala took him out of the game. And when that's the case, I wonder, why would you even put him in there to begin with if you're just going to shove him off to the side? That's a weird decision in my book. And so from this portion, we see the bulk of the episode, the real meat of the episode, is tied to Taiga. Now, Taiga was very wise last episode in getting that blood sample and revealing to basically the whole audience that Emu does have the Bugster virus within him. So he decides to ask Genmu after a fight, why is it that this is the case? Is this why you killed Kitty? Is this the reason? Is this your motivation? Why are you doing this? What do you know? Now, instead of just saying something cryptic and walking away, Kuroto Dan actually drops a bombshell on us. It turns out that Emu is Patient Zero. He was the originator of the Bugster virus as far as it spreading out. At which point I'm there watching and I'm like, what? How could this be? Well, he'll go ahead and tell you. Now, the way this orchestrates together is actually beautifully done. It actually manages to legitimize the recent Heisei Generations movie with what's currently going on in the show, which they promised, and it seems that they are making good on that promise. So let's go ahead and explain the timeline here. So like I said, we had that flashback to 6 years ago when Emu was working on training to be in that tournament that we mentioned. Well, it turns out he trained a little too hard and passed out. So at that point, he was considering going into being a doctor, but he was still kind of taking gaming seriously, so he focused on games more. As a result, he didn't take care of his health, and that's why he passed out. Now to Emu, he has this dream that he was operated on. Now to Emu, that appears that it's a flashback to the surgery he had much younger, where he was given the game system by Dr. Kyotaro, and from there, people think that's what motivated him to be a doctor, but apparently it's this apparent dream that he had, but it turns out it wasn't a dream at all. What actually happened was that Zaizen Michihiko, the person we see in the trailers that we've been seeing at the beginning of the episodes as Dr. Pac-Man, was the guy who operated on him. It turns out he was trying to get the Bugster virus to manifest out of Emu, and then things went awry, and that's how the events of Heisei Generations happened. But here, that's what actually created the Bugster virus, and Emu has no recollection of it. He just thinks it was all some weird dream. Now, I appreciate it so much when the movie wars decide to go ahead and have this kind of weight and actually carry in the story and make it canon. Really, I haven't seen anything pay that much attention to canon as far as a movie war is concerned since Kamen Rider Double, so I'm very appreciative that we're keeping this here in Ex-Aid. Now, the funny thing about this is that now we have 3 people who know that Emu has Bugster virus aside from Emu. We have Brave, Snipe, Genmu, and of course Laser, God rest his soul. But at this point, everybody but Emu knows, so the decisions that are being made as a result of this are kind of odd. Kuroto Dan states that anybody who's trying to stop the Bugster virus is someone he will eliminate, but at this point, everybody other than him who's a writer is trying to stop it, so why isn't he trying harder to kill them like he did Kirya? That's a little weird. Now, as far as Hiro and Taiga are concerned, they discuss amongst themselves, hey, we know that Emu has this virus, this is probably how he's able to transform, how do we handle this, how do we go about this? Now, they say something that's a little bit counterintuitive to what I would actually think would be the smart decision. Taiga theorizes out loud, can you imagine what it would be like if he found out that he had Bugster virus, the stress it would cause him? Now, you would think that with them being the kind of people they are, Taiga very much wants to defeat him and Hiro wants to be at the top of his game as a surgeon and also as a writer, you would think they would want to stress him out. But the thing is, they don't seem to want to tell him that, which they clearly state would stress him. So they decide that combat is the best way to go about this. I'm not so sure that works. Now, you would think they would tell him straight up and have the stress take effect now, but no, this is a children's television show, so they have to stretch it out and have people not telling people things that are very obvious. It's a very Kamen Rider Faiz thing to do, but whatever, it's still the same franchise. We're gonna see a carryover. So we see that Taiga and Hiro laid a trap for Emu to basically combat him and do something. We're not quite sure why they decided to do this. This seems like any other fight that they've had previously here in the show. But really the bigger reason for this trap/fight is for the debut of the new writer. So Kuroto Dan has finished his research on the newest gacha, which he's giving to Paula, which he's going to demonstrate now for everyone to see. This gives him the power to become Kamen Rider Paradox level 50. Now with this power, he's able to become 2 different forms, the Perfect Puzzle form and the Knockout Fighter form, one of course being based off puzzle games, the other based off something that's clearly Street Fighter without being Street Fighter. Now his biggest advantage is the ability to unlock and combine energy items in order to make new powers for himself, which we see displayed in a very odd rider kick. I'm not sure that I would qualify it as a rider kick. I mean, he did use his legs and he did kick, but it seems more like something Nintendo's developing for that new ARMS game for the Switch. But of course, since he's level 50 and we have levels 5, 5, and 3 respectively on the field, he wipes the floor with them very easily. But he doesn't kill them, he wants to stretch the game out, he wants to enjoy it. Now it was one thing when Genmu decided to reach level 10 before everyone else did, but he was only off by a few levels, there was a potential for him to be beaten. But since Paradox is level 50, he's 30 levels above anybody clearly on the field, so there's no equal for him right now. And with that being the case, that might make things a little bit boring. Now, do I like the form? Yes and no. Perfect Puzzle makes sense for Paulad since he's been playing those kinds of games, or seems to have been a fan of those kinds of games since episode 1. But the fighter game is less like him, but I like the design more. Now it's interesting that it's just a gacha that's a very thick one, kind of like how the Mighty Brothers Double X is, but it doesn't seem to need a belt. Everything is housed there in the gacha, which makes it interesting, but again, kind of boring. Really, for a new writer debut, it was kind of lackluster. When Genmu decided to debut level 10 zombie, that was really something to be wowed about, and we already talked about that episode, but here, this is just kind of, you know? But of course we'll see what he does with these powers going into the next episode, where we're going to see Snipe using the Dragonite Hunter Z gacha to have all of the power invested into him and have that all-dragon form, and we'll see a bit more development with Emu and his Bugster side, and we don't know what we're going to see out of that. but I know they still need to drag this out a little bit further because we have to see how Paradox is going to fit into all of this. You guys tell me what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Do you think Saibaniko is a character they're going to keep around for a while and build up more as far as story is concerned? Do you think that it's okay that the humor in this episode was lacking in favor of telling more story? And what do you guys think of Paradox as this new writer? Do you like the powers, or do you wish he had some other kind of game? And of course, during the week, you can always follow me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 15 of Ex-Aid Replay. For episode 15 of the series, a new challenger appears. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.